were something, I would bang it, but I don't. So I just have a loud voice to say welcome to everybody. We want to have a few special welcomes for the out-of-town people. This table is pretty much the Johnson family from California. So we have our sister-in-law Jenny, who was married to Ted's brother Pete, and we have, let's see, young Pete and his two sons, Ian and Caleb, a nephew of Ted's. We have Gary, a nephew of Ted's. We have Michelle, a niece of Ted's, and her husband Dan. Did I cover the table? Did I forget anybody? That's the Johnsons. Oh, and on Ted's mother's side, representing the Salmons, there's, hold your head up, that's Nick Salmon and his wife Kavita, and Ted's mother was a Salmon, and there are lots of Salmons, but Nick is representing all the Salmons. So, thank you. And on my side, one representative, my kid brother Bill, from Florida. He's up here. And there's no real prizes, but there's a tie for the people coming the farthest. That's a tie between Kay Henry here, who came from Spain, who was Ted's student, and Marion Ladevez. Where are you, Marion? There she is. She came from Paris, and we've known her since she was 18 years old when we were directing the Bordeaux program. She was 18 at the time. That was, I won't say how long ago, Marion, that just divulges your age. Your age. Okay, and I have some thank yous, but this is mainly the welcome to all of you. You've all been a part of Ted's life in some way, and we really appreciate it. Many of you remember Ted getting folks out twice a year at the spring and fall equinox up on the brow of 14th Street and Jayhawk Boulevard. At the equinox at 5:30 in the morning. I did it once, only once, 5:30. But people did. They came up with telescopes and all the rest. And this was to watch the sun come up, because Ted thought it was great that the sun came in a straight line up 14th Street, and the sun illuminated the manhole covers, which turned into golden discs. This was, that's Ted. So Anne, our daughter Anne, suggested we hold this celebration on the equinox. And we didn't realize how fortunate that it was spring break, because it's kind of quiet in town, and it's really kind of nice to have it there. Ted wanted his celebration of life here at the gallery, so we thank them for making it possible, and Stephen, who worked with the gallery to have this fantastic three-generation of Johnsons show. He'll talk more about that, I think, later. And thanks to them, we wanted to thank also, of course, besides the gallery, the Alferd Packer Band. Ted wanted them to play. He loved them. We used to go out to the Vinland Fair and listen to the Alferd Packer Band all the time. So, and to Evan Williams for the incredible hors d'oeuvre, Evan, wherever you are. Oh, Michelle, you made the homemade cookies? Oh, the homemade cookies by Michelle. Oh my gosh, our niece. Thank you. To Joel Sanderson, is Joel here somewhere? Joel, working with Stephen, helped to put together this video of Ted doing walking tours and whatever, and with input from George Duggar, who was right there prowling around with his camera and will probably videotape some of you. And this will be on YouTube. I mean, with appropriate TED talking and all the rest. It will be on YouTube, so you'll be able to see it. Oh, Anne says there's a place you can scan it up on the register. Okay, is that one of those code things? QR things. Okay, QR things. I'm not into QR things so much. Okay, just to say again how blessed I am in all of this to have my family in town. Both our children live in town, Anne and her husband Chris, and Stephen and his girlfriend Joan. They've been a huge support to me. They invite me for dinner all the time. Chris and Stephen are trying to bring my 105-year-old house on Massachusetts Street up to speed. The foundation's crumbling, all kinds of stuff we never took care of. And the sharing and the care of my dogs, I not only have Ruddy, some of you know, the 10-year-old, but now I have a Cavapoo. Is Marcia still here? Marcia Hill, because we have litter mates, Cavapoo litter mates, and he's just a little guy, so that's kind of fun. And my granddaughter Emma lives in town, and my granddaughter Sophie now lives in Brooklyn, but she came back, and there's my other granddaughter, and their mom Debbie and her family are here in town, and so I am truly blessed. I'm also grateful for my friends. Where are they? My friends Heather Lambert, where are you? Heather Lambert and Tia Weathers. They're both there. They were Ted's caregivers. They've become friends. They're still with me, helping to declutter my house, right? And take care of my dogs. They're wonderful. And Susie Dubois, where is Susie? Susie should be somewhere. Susie has helped us for years and years. There she is, back there. Susie's been with us for years and years and years, and so I'm extremely grateful. And how lucky we are to have had all of you as friends, and that you're here today. I'm so pleased. Just before we hear from my kids and a couple of other former students of Ted's and whatever, just say please sign the guest register back there. And I don't know if you've noticed the star certificate. Where is the star certificate? Oh, it's there. Okay, thanks to Suzanne Hampton, there's now a star in the sky. There's a Ted Johnson. Did you know that you could name a star? I didn't know that. You can name a star, and so it's in the Gemini. Of course, Ted was a Gemini. It's in the Gemini constellation, a Ted Johnson star. I haven't found it yet. You know, we have to find a clear night and, and warm weather, but it's there. So, anyway, thank you. He is now shining down on all of us. So, thank you, welcome, and I'm going to turn it over to my kids.
Well, thank you for coming. We're Anne and Stephen, Ted's children, Ted and Mary's children. We wanted to share a few remarks with you, and we're thrilled that you could be here this afternoon. Thrilled that this is on the equinox. Very apt that this is a celebration of life. I know that's a term that we use for everyone's celebration of life, but honestly, all of you here, do you know anyone who celebrated life more than Dad? Really? Right? I mean, it's like this term was made for him. He loved celebrating life. Every day, every month, every year, he found ways to celebrate it. So we're thrilled that you could be here to celebrate it with him today. It means a lot to all of us. We're not trying to, I think Steve and I are not going to try to define Dad, because Lord knows there's no defining Dad. But we are going to try to give you some memories of what it's like to grow up, as children of Dad. If we did try to define Dad, anyone, Mom mentioned he was a Gemini. The truth is, if you said to Dad, what's your sign? He would say, Lepus. Because Lepus means rabbit, and that's not one of the 12 zodiac signs, because he would not want to be defined. So we're not going to try to define him.
Seen as the whale.
Yeah, the whale, right. And that too. He was either a whale or he was a rabbit, but he was not one of the 12 zodiac signs. So.
Yeah, we were curious too to see how many people here have been to the Bastille Day party.
Oh my God.
Yeah, look at that.
Woohoo.
Anybody, the little dinner parties in 2032? Yeah, there's some.
Dinner.
Yay!
Yeah.
I think dinner defines our family and the whole idea of camaraderie, community, friends, people spontaneously coming over, just enjoying food, drink, that kind of thing. The reason why we have whiskey sours tonight is because we grew up with Dad's blender and fresh lemons, particularly after a good day of teaching. And then his cocktails would be terrific with Mom's cooking, which is based on Julia Child cooking. So we had this wonderful kind of celebratory time. And as we always are told by our French friends, c'est toujours la fête chez les Johnson, which is it's always a party at the Johnsons, and Paul knows that. Where are you, Paul? There's Paul. And Paul, at the Bastille Day party is a fixture too. So he's a wonderful
dinners.
man.
I mean, the truth is, we as a family always sat down every night to eat at the table. Which I don't know. Maybe that's common for all of you. Maybe you did that too. I think it's uncommon now. People don't sit down together as a family. We always sat down, the four of us, at the table. I can probably count right on two hands the number of times we actually went upstairs to the TV area and watched
that would happen because Anne wouldn't clear the table.
Well,
I
didn't
We had
like
our
doing
chores
it.
and
We did
some
have our
people-
chores.
yeah.
That's right. That's true. But we would sit at the table, we would talk. We would just talk for hours and hours. Where's Laura? Laura Hunt. Laura would come over, and we would die laughing because, and Laura, I felt so horrible because we talked about the most outlandish, crazy things, right, Laura? And I'd be so embarrassed. I thought, Laura's going to go home to Sue and Dick, who are behind her, and tell stories about what we talk about at the dinner table because everything was fair game, right? And we would laugh and talk and sometimes be
Inappropriate at times.
Sometimes a
The
little
best
appropriate. Yeah, but it was fun. That's how we celebrated. We would have Mexican dinners and Greek dinners, and Dad would put on Mexican. He'd put Herb Albert and the Tijuana Brass on for our Mexican dinners. So we have this association with that. The cover whipped cream and other delights. We have that association that's Mexican dinners.
Well, yeah, so the Beatles figured prominently. So on Christmas morning, I would bless "Good Morning" by the Beatles. It just, it's time to go downstairs and check on the presents, right?
Yeah.
And then birthday, say it's your birthday, and play all that.
Yeah, every time we'd have a birthday, Dad would use that song, "You Say It's Your Birthday," but we never knew the words, honestly. Dad didn't know the words, so Dad would just say at the beginning, "You say it's your birthday, boom, 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 gonna have a good time, boom, boom." That's it. Then we forgot the rest of the words. But the celebrations were real. I mean, we celebrated, Dad, you'll see in this video that hopefully you'll be able to access. He would make a wreath every single year. He would make a handmade wreath. He would put together the kash, the nativity scene, every single year. He'd make homemade cookies when we grew up. There's just celebrations, ways to kind of recognize the moments and recognize the specialness of that, either the day or the event. Birthdays had balloons, always homemade cards. Lord, you not get a store-bought card, you get a homemade card that took him hours to put together, but were meaningful. I still have my collection of homemade cards from Dad and now Stephen too.
Well, it's the idea of the box that a toy came in is much more interesting than the toy. and that's Dad, right? So that whatever that is can be transformed. So our childhood and life is about transformation, it's about connections, and I think many of you have experienced that with Dad too. It's the idea of flavor. What is the flavor in cooking? You taste it. It may be subtle, it may be bold, it may be zesty, it may repeat itself, it may be silent, it may be nothing at all, it may be everything at once. That's Dad, right? So the flavor is about, beyond food, it's about character, it's about impressions, it's about life. We all have flavor, we enjoy flavor. What is the flavor of art? What is the flavor of the sound of music? What is the flavor of the air? Is it, these kind of things. So his perception of life that way is like Jimi Hendrix, are you experienced? And we were experienced, we had experiences, and we still do, and all of you that are here today have had experiences with Dad in some form or another.
And very creative. I mean, he was so creative and detailed. I mean, you've seen that in his artwork, but picture that creativity and apply it to two little kids who want to have Halloween costumes. Wow. Now suddenly you have Napoleon. Stephen was Napoleon, and we're not just talking, we're talking the whole hat and the cape and the cape.
I didn't have the ego.
No, we didn't have the ego. Or Laura and I were Snoopy. He made us Snoopy costumes, and my friend was Woodstock. I mean, crazy. You and Dad were King and Queen of Hearts, right? And you won best prize on the QE2, right, when we went over? You still have those costumes upstairs? I mean, really amazing creativity that you brought to the family, brought to all of us, all of you too.
Part of, as you all know, Dad is about projects, and our home has been always overwhelmed with projects. And so in the last couple of years with his archives, it's been, as his health declined, slower and slower progress on the archives, which we were delighted to say were finally turned in 12 beautiful boxes, all organized to the Spencer Research Library. So if you're interested, they're there. But it's a household where the whiskey sours may be made by me now, and then the corner of the dining room table pushed aside all this paperwork so we could eat, and then more archives. And growing up, we had Dad's projects, the Proust newsletter that would go on forever. He employed Mom and can be to staple and mail these net letters all over the world. But in so doing, he connected to Proustians and colleagues of the French literature all over the globe, and just every single continent, and it was beautiful. And he did it just pro bono, and that's the kind of person he was.
Yeah. We should mention, besides, all of you went to the Bastille Day party. Here's another question we should ask. How many of you, this would be interesting to find out, how many of you went to Mom and Dad's toga party back in the 80s? Oh my gosh, there's one. Yay!
Yeah. The best outfit was a Snoopy sheet.
No.
A kid's Snoopy sheet, I'll never forget.
It was?
Yeah.
It really was? Oh, no,
But the quintessential party was the yellow submarine party.
Oh, yeah.
So KU Union used to sell big sheets of cardboard, and Dad's is a miracle with cardboard. We had a gigantic layered yellow submarine in the dining room I wouldn't let them put it down. We had blue meanies, body painting, all that kind of stuff. It was great.
I mean, really?
Yeah.
This is real. Like,
And the
behind
basement was the party singing. So when my rock band in high school would play down there, the first time we kicked it, Dad was running around the house looking at our grandpa's pastels if they were shaking off the wall. But, bless Mom and Dad's heart, they let us just crank it out and just, blow the house away with music, and they're fine.
Which is a really big deal, because rule number one in a Johnson house is save the paintings. Rule number one. So, tornado warnings come, Stephen and Dad go through the house, take the paintings, the valuable, 5 or 6 paintings,
Big ones.
big paintings. Some of them still have sweat marks from when it was like in the middle of the summer. I would take the guinea pig and the dogs, and we would go downstairs and put the paintings. You always take the paintings downstairs. You guys know what I'm talking about. For fire. They do it for fire.
California fire.
The California cousins do the same thing. It's number one. Save the paintings.
Except one year, we took them down, the basement starts to flood. Immediately back up again. Another year, Mom and Dad were gone, Ann was flirting with the guy next door at the front porch. And
Sorry,
he was up
Chris.
and down and up and down.
That's true.
Yeah, so.
We can't not talk about our childhood without talking about France and Bordeaux and dear Marion and her parents, of course, Françoise and Aldemay, who you'll see in the video as well. So much of our formative years obviously were spent in France, in Bordeaux, in Arcachon, where Marion still has the beautiful family home that we spent so much time in. So for us, the memories of that, we're going to, in large part, going to the beach in Arcachon, this pristine, gorgeous beach. We're, 7 and 9 years old. We have to walk what seems like forever to get to our destination in the morning. And we have carried with us not only our lunch, but our dinner. And we're little kids, we're schlepping through the stand, carrying all this stuff to go to the point on the beach where we're going to spend the day. We build a fort, and so you literally have a fort. You remember this, Alice, too? We build a fort, hunker down for the day, spend the entire day on the beach.
I need to interrupt.
I know what he says.
They were also nude. It was a nudist beach. It was just my parents and Germans.
It was a lot.
What would happen is that the Spanish and Portuguese ships would throw lumber and crap over the side, and it would wash up on the Atlantic coast. And it was these beautiful big dunes. And so everybody made these little private forts. So there we were. And I, of course, had nothing to do with the nudity.
No, it was a lot.
But yeah, it was kind of fun. Anyway, Mom and Dad got burned everywhere. And so we'd have these days. It was great. And this is also an opportunity to talk about Dad's photography, because Dad was a really beautiful photographer. He had his father's Leica camera, and it had this little attachment on the top. I never understood it, that everything was upside down. So he was always this stuff everywhere. And so on these dunes with the light, the shadows of the reeds, and they call it the Côte d'Argent because it's a silver coast, and the lighting in Bordeaux and that part of the Atlantic really is silver. And as you all know from different parts of the world, light is different. California light is different than Kansas light. That's why our grandfather's paintings have this sort of California light to their watercolors. And so we really captured that. But of course, Ann and I would just be tired at another Romanesque church stop.
Well, yeah.
Oh no, not another one.
Yeah, traveling with a family. I mean, Mom and Dad just took us everywhere. They just picked us up and took us everywhere, right? So we would go across the country in the United States, across France, everywhere, which sounds romantic and wonderful and beautiful. When you're 6 years old and Dad says, "One more church," you just want the ice cream that's like across the store, across the way. You don't really want to go into one more church and look up at the stained glass, but you do it because because it meant a lot to Dad. So that things we grew up with that were just part of our life that now looking back, of course, we love those moments. But it's not always easy to have to go into schlep around and kind of follow someone as wonderful and expansive as Dad throughout life. It can be hard work too. Some of you have had conversations with him. Those conversations can be hours, right? What you think is going to be just a 2-minute check-in kind of conversation can turn to an hour, 2 hours. So, we sometimes would have little escape routes from either the dinner table or from one more church, right?
Yeah. Well, we should move on with our guests.
We should move on. So, we do want to, again, thank you. There's ways that we would, welcome you to consider honoring, remembering Dad. I think the most important one is to, like Dad, find something maybe new and every day, or a different way to look at something, a different way to see something, spend 10 more minutes than you thought you had looking up, looking at a facade, talk to someone a bit longer than you thought you were going to talk to them, look at a flower more deeply than you thought you were going to be. Dad, the great thing about Dad is that he really he loved teaching, but he loved learning. He loved both of those, right? Even at the very end, like his last few days in the hospital, and he was kind of going in and out of lucidity, one of the nurses said to him, "You're a professor, right?" And he said, "Well, we all are." And it was so beautiful. Like he just said it without missing a beat, and she kind of didn't quite get that, but he was always in that mode, right? He always wanted to teach, but he wanted to learn. And you would be thrilled to know that when he was in those kind of moments in the end of kind of being, partly lucid, partly not, one time he was very lucid. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, "I'm teaching." And he had his eyes closed. "I'm teaching." And I said, "Where are you teaching?" "I'm teaching in a stadium with 1,000 people. And I'm teaching Greek and philosophy in German." And I said, "Wow, And he said, "I was teaching with a chalkboard," which those of you who know Dad know how untechnological he was. That was a huge, thing for him. He was actually using a blackboard with chalk, So he was always learning and teaching and evolving. He wanted me to teach him Sanskrit, because I was taking this class, and he wanted me to teach him new vocabulary. He finally, Mom talked about the clutter in the house, finally realized at the end of his life that clutter really was not his friend, something I tried to tell my parents for 30 years. He finally got that, so he was always evolving. So we ask, take that with you. Take that with you when you look at the world a little bit differently. Sign the register. There's a QR code. There's a big QR code which will give you access to an award that we started actually 25 years ago, the Ted Johnson Interrelation of Humanities and the Arts Award at KU. And that will take you to, it will give you the title of that. If you care to make a donation, you would then have to link up to KU Endowment. Please scan the QR code that gives you access to this video with him talking. I think you would love that.
Also, when we finally get around to looking at all of his books of poetry and French literature and art, for those of you who are interested, make a little note by your email in the guest book, and we'll reach out to you and have some days when you can come and just take a look. Some of them will have his writing in it, which I think might be significant. This show is up tomorrow from 1 to 5, and then on Sunday I'll give an informal artist talk here at 6:30 to 8 if you're interested in learn more about the art. Something else.
Yeah, well, one special thank you. Again, Dad had the luxury of being able to ideate and think expansively as he did. it's not everyone gets that luxury, right? Because some people are just focused on just trying to make money, trying to pay their bills and trying to be in that world. So we want to give a really huge shout out to Mom, because without her, there is no way Dad could have had this opportunity to, be creative, be expansive. Mom was the yin to Dad's yang. Mom was the one who kept us organized, who kept this. So we really want to thank her in front of all of you, because there would not be a dad without Mom, there would not be a mom without Dad. So we're blessed to have been the children of two amazing humans, and we get to say that to her today. All right, thank you so much. And let's see, who's
Sophie, do you want to say something?
A really particular conversation that I had with him, which to me is just like how I would describe him to anyone. When I was a teenager and entering my sophomore year of high school, we would always go over to my grandparents' house and have dinner, and of course I would just pretty consistently complain the whole time. And in my grandpa's typical fashion, he turned my teenage complaints into an etymology lesson. I mean, at the time I'd be like, what? But now I'm like, oh wow, that was special. So a particular thing, I was complaining about being a sophomore in high school, and he would go, Sophie, did you know that sophomore comes from the Greek word sophos, meaning wise, and moros, meaning foolish? You're embarking on a year as a wise fool. He then launched into a detailed explanation of how this concept evolved through different levels of education, concluding with a delighted, how fun. Which, at the time I was like, no, it's not fun. But I think that this story kind of perfectly encapsulates who my grandpa was, a man who found joy in knowledge and who could transform the mundane into the extraordinary. I'd kind of like to continue with this concept with just a few other little moments that I really remember him by. As we all know, he's without a doubt one of the most intelligent, prolific thinkers I have ever known, and I think I will ever know, which is something bold to say at 26. But my grandpa had an uncanny ability to elevate any conversation, turning casual chats into enlightening discussions, he once told me, which is something I think about a lot, especially in my journeys in New York and meeting new people. There are people who talk about people who talk about things, and people who talk about ideas. The people who talk about ideas are the ones you should keep around you, which is a very simple saying, but it's something I think about quite often. As we all know, he's quite an academic, but his wisdom wasn't confined to just academic knowledge. I think that he could find really beautiful moments in the ordinary, which my dad and my aunt already talked about, but another thing that was really special between me and my grandpa was when I was really, really young, we would go out in the snow and draw these Winnie the Pooh characters in the snow together. I know my grandma knows what I'm talking about, which he then went on to write about, which is just like a beautiful example of finding beauty in this tiny little moment with just a grandpa to granddaughter connection. Another thing we did together was attempt to grow watermelons using a sundial. And I remember eating them, and the watermelons were so gross. But he did not seem dampened by that at all. He was just so excited that we did it using the sun as our guide, and that's all that really matters. I think that his interests were as varied as they were deep. He loved listening to Stardate on NPR, something I remember quite fondly, like going to Grandma and Grandpa's after school, and we'd have to be quiet during Stardate. He loved attending to his garden, watching the news with a critical eye, which is something, especially growing up in Kansas, I did not take for granted. Having very liberal grandparents was something that not a lot of other people had. Not only having liberal grandparents, but like my grandparents, so, worldly, and that's something really special. I actually remember talking to my roommate recently during the whole Chiefs season, which was embarrassing. And, I'm in New York now, so of course all my friends there are voting for the Eagles. But regardless, my friend was like, oh yeah, the thing I did with my grandparents the most was just watch football. And I was like, really? The thing I probably did with my grandparents, like, that was similar would be like they took us to operas. So, yeah, you know, the way he devoured books, savored good food, traveled to new places, these are things that I have taken on as a grandchild and am very grateful for. And very grateful for just the family I have, and I thank you all for being here because I know his favorite thing in life was the meeting of the minds with people that he loved, and you are all very much.
Tributes from former students of Ted's, and Keith Vincent, where are you? Here. Keith came in from Boston. He's actually teaching a Proust seminar. Of course, you know Ted was a Proustian. We'll have Keith, and then we'll have Kay Henry here, who was a student of Ted's, who lives in Spain, as I said. And then we'll have Eric. Where are you? Eric Morgenthaler. He was one of the Bordeaux buddies in Bordeaux in 1973-74. And finally, Hampton Stevens. If any of you, were any of you at Ted's retirement party in 2001? You were. And you were. Merle, yes, Merle, one of Ted's students who's become a very well-known professor at Ottawa. Hampton Stevens spoke at that in 2001, so he'll be the last guy. And then we'll have this surprise from these guys over here who wrote a song for Ted. Wow, I didn't know that. Keith Vincent, okay? Keith was in the Beta House. And do any of you remember that the Beta House, they used to have a turkey thing? Do you remember that? A turkey? And we were invited to the Beta House, and this turkey, Keith invited us, this live turkey. They outlawed it eventually because they thought it was mean to the turkey, but it really was, wasn't it?
Thanks, Mary. Hi, everyone. I'm a little nervous, so you have to forgive me. I am a professor, and I'm not usually nervous, but I'm nervous today. It's really wonderful to be here and to see you all, and to share some memories of Professor Johnson, whom I still struggle to call Ted. I don't actually have, I have to admit, I don't have that many memories of Ted, although the ones I do have are incredibly important to me. I got to know Ted and Mary as a student here in Lawrence in the late 1980s. I graduated in 1990, and then crazily, I didn't see them again until 2023, when I finally got back in touch. I'm so glad that I did that. More on that later. But during all those years, Ted has always been a huge presence in my mind. I first came to Lawrence from Tulsa, where I grew up, for the fall semester of 1986. I got here as freshmen due sometime in August to get settled and move into the fraternity house that Mary just mentioned, where I lived all those years. I was planning to study French, and I was so excited for school to start that day, that one day, in the week before classes began, I walked up to Wesco Hall just to check out the French department and try to soak up the atmosphere on campus. As I remember it, the building was completely empty, with that late August hush that falls over a campus when everyone is somewhere else trying to get the most out of the last dregs of summer. It was extremely hot and bright outside, and I remember the blast of ice-cold air conditioning as I came into that low, dark, concrete building and started to wander around the halls, trying to imagine what it would be like the next week when classes started. The classrooms were all empty and all the professors' doors were shut, which was disappointing. But then I saw that one office door was open. So I poked my head in, and there sat a person who looked sort of like Santa Claus, totally surrounded by books. Santa Claus smiled at me and said, "Come right in," so I did. I looked at him, I looked around at all the books, and then we started talking. My memory of that day is that I spent hours and hours talking to Professor Johnson. I'm sure it wasn't actually hours and hours, but it felt like it was, and I felt so lucky to have him all to myself. I can't remember much about what we talked about, but I do remember two things very clearly. I must have told him the classes I was planning to take that first semester, some requirements, no doubt, that I had been told I should get out of the way. But he told me to ignore those requirements. I could do all that later. For now, for this first semester, I should take only classes that I was really passionate about. I should look through the course catalog as if I were looking at a menu at a great restaurant and choose only the most delicious dishes. It was fabulous advice, and it got me off to a great start in school, including Corinne Anderson's advanced French conversation class and other great classes. I just gave the same advice to my niece when she started college last fall, and it's working out great for her too. Then Ted told me that if there were ever a class I wanted to take and I couldn't get in for some reason, or if there was a requirement that needed to be waived so I could have room to take something I was really passionate about, that all I needed to do was come to him and he would sign whatever form needed to be signed. Never, he said, let the university get in the way of your education. Now, Mary tells me that this was a famous saying of Ted's, but I have always thought that he was saying it just to me, and it made me feel very special. The other thing I remember from that day is the feeling I had from the moment I walked into Ted's office that I was being taken seriously, that he was taking time to talk with me and that he cared about what I thought. I remember him explaining to me that the etymology of education, it's about pulling out what's inside someone, not stuffing knowledge in. It's strange to say it, but I actually never managed to take a class with Ted. I'm not sure why, looking back. What I did was just sort of hang around him and absorb the atmosphere. I remember going to Ted and Mary's Bastille Day parties in the summer. I have a very strong memory from when I was studying abroad and going with a friend to visit Ted in the hospital in Paris. It was July 14th, 1989, the bicentennial of the actual Bastille Day, and a friend and I fought our way through the crowds of revelers along the Champs-Élysées to go to visit. It felt wonderful to see Ted and Mary in Paris, and I remember looking out, I don't know if this is a true memory, but I remember looking out on the Arc de Triomphe and uncorking a bottle of champagne. I invited him and Mary to my fraternity Christmas party with the turkey that you mentioned in 1988, and they came in glamorous formal wear. One of the many other things that Ted gave me was his love for Marcel Proust. I started reading Proust as an undergrad when I heard Ted describe the cost of buying one of the volumes as about the same as a deluxe pizza with all the toppings, but even more delicious. I took my time, decades actually, finishing all 7 volumes. But then a few years ago, I started to read Proust again for the second time. This time, I read the scholarship on Proust too, and I kept coming across mentions of Ted's work. When I tracked down the articles he wrote, I could go on and on about these articles, but I found them to be some of the most moving and inspiring pieces of writing about literature that I had ever read. And reading Ted's articles and realizing that he had been writing them back when I knew him, but that I couldn't have appreciated them at that time, reignited my love for Proust and my memories of Ted. I told Mary the other day that every time I run across his name in an article or find another piece he wrote, it feels like stumbling on an Easter egg. Let's just say it's very Proustian. So I wrote to Ted in 2023 to tell him I was reading his work and to get back in touch. I thought he might not remember me since more than 3 decades had passed. He looms so large in my life, but as a professor myself, I know that students come and go, and it's hard to remember them all. Well, he did remember me. And when I came to see him and Mary a couple of years ago, it was as if no time had passed at all. I think I'll close by sharing with you the email I got from Ted when I got back in contact in 2023. Dear Keith, how wonderful to hear from you. I have often cited the moment when we crossed in the hallway of Wesco Hall. You had just washed out your brushes from a Japanese calligraphy class, and we were speaking French. Those precious moments epitomize for me the wonderful place, dialogues that take place in the liberal arts in a university. How not to imagine persons from various countries, i.e. John of Salisbury, standing before the mid-12th century sculpted liberal arts cycle on the western facade of the Cathedral of Notre Dame, Notre Dame de Chartres in France, speaking in Latin about ancient texts they were setting down in ink on parchment for the next generations. Mary and I have fond memories of the extraordinary Egyptian fantasy in the Rock Chalk Review that I directed for our fraternity. And of course, the visionary turkey pole Christmas party at the Beta House. But above all, your infectious enthusiasm for everything. It's your enthusiasm that I treasure. I remember fondly our years together at the University of Kansas, and I am so proud of your participation in the University of the World. I do so look forward to sharing our moments together in the future. Fondly, with merry, misty eyes, Ted. Ted, thank you for your enthusiasm. Thanks for introducing me to great books that rival deluxe pizzas with all the toppings. Thanks for showing me how to be a teacher, even without teaching me a class. Thanks for helping me chuck the requirements of life and focus on education. And thanks for showing me how deeply nourishing, meaningful, and fun life in the University of the World can be.
If you want an example of how Ted lives in my brain, and I'm sure in a lot of yours, I was watching Jeopardy the other day. The clue was about the origins of the color purple, not the book, the color purple. And I knew the answer because of a conversation I had with Ted 30 years ago. Another Jeopardy question about which plant name comes from the Greek for lover of trees. And of course, you know, philo, lover of wisdom, philosophe, and dendrite. So philodendron would be the lover of trees, and that's how you know that. And then I started thinking about dendrites and how that also describes the shape of the brain, that kind of branching and rebranching shape of the brain, which is also what a river does, which is also what your blood veins do, and then I'm in Ted Johnson land. But there's a bit more to it than that. It's because of Ted that I first understood who I am as a person. When I showed up in Kansas in 1980-something, I certainly was not an outcast, but I didn't really understand the way my mind worked was profoundly different from the way of so many other people's. I'm sure that's an experience a lot of people in this room have had. I still remember discovering his class, Interrelationships of Humanities and the Arts, and I was thunderstruck. I knew that I was home. Walking around campus, dissecting and riffing on the position of the sunset or the sunrise or the angels spinning in the architecture was a revelation to me. I discovered so much about myself through him, and I was able to accept and explore who I am as a poet, and as an artist, and as an intellectual, as a man, as a human being. It is remarkable to think about the thousands of other students he did the same for, and how so many of them are now sharing that light with subsequent generations, like a butterfly's wings. I used to describe those classes and the beautiful hours spent talking about art in front of paintings at the Spencer, dissecting the signs and symbols, as the Da Vinci Code for smart people. Except real. And I feel incredibly privileged to have been able to spend so much time talking with him and thinking about art with him. There's a story I like to tell, which I cut from this because I'm trying to make the speech short. But we were standing, I'm going to lose it for a second here. We were standing with a group of people to Spencer, and we were looking at a painting of the Virgin Mary. And in traditional iconography, Mary is always wearing red and blue. And I said, oh, just like, you know, KU. She's a Jayhawk. It's our alma mater, Mary. So that was kind of the typical, you know, there was that moment where you can feel synaptic connections being made. And I don't think there's any more beautiful experience in life than that. But the pop culture reference that seemed the most significant to Ted's life was Dead Poets Society. The movie came out when I was flat out making up classes just to spend time with him. And I think he really felt validated by that film and saw Williams as a kindred spirit. It was a kind of joyous thing to see him have the experience of his ethos and his life work be validated in popular culture that way. Our close connection continued for the better part of the 90s as my college career stretched on and on and on. And at some point it was just me not wanting to leave Lawrence. I wrote him a paper on obelisks. I wrote him a 20-page paper on Stairway to Heaven in which I compared Plante's lyrics to Baudelaire. That is true. One year I sang for him. Much later, I spoke at his retirement, a speech that Mary praises every time she sees me, and I wish for the life of me I could remember what I said. I have no copies of it anywhere as far as I know. Then, life. Soon it was just Bastille Day parties. Then eventually, to my deep regret, we drifted. We lost touch. The last few times I saw him were born of a strange and happy accident. I don't know if you know this, I honestly thought he had passed away. And I would think all the time how much I missed him. Not in a sentimental way, necessarily, but because I simply never met anyone on planet Earth that I could talk to the way we talked. I have never met anyone who took the same boyish glee in intellectual discovery. Sorry. It was a bizarre happenstance that we reconnected just before he died. I sing professionally, and I have a fake Instagram account called a Finsta. I use this to promote my fledgling career. That's what the kids call it, don't blame me. However, because I am terrible at self-promotion, I never post videos on there, ever. But one time, last spring, I decided to post a version of me singing Dock of the Bay. The only problem is that I accidentally posted it on my main account, an account I haven't posted to in 7 years. 2 people liked the post before I realized what had happened and took it down. One was my crush, one was Stephen, and he messaged me with the surprising news that Ted was still alive. I did not, of course, mention that I was surprised, but I did immediately call Mary and make arrangements to visit. It was glorious. It was magic. We were able to reconnect and share memories and also comment on the bizarre, sad, and beautiful passage of time. Better yet, he immediately became an important part of my daily thoughts again, as I wrote and sang and took pictures. And it was absolutely gorgeous how quickly I fell back into my role as student and mentor. I explained to him, for instance, the appeal of Taylor Swift. He helped me understand the psychic implosion of Enlightenment values at the advent of the First World War, a subject of interest to me. I still need you to find that syllabus about your class in 1913. The last time I saw him, I sang. I brought my sound equipment up to the house, set it up in the living room, we did an hour-long set of standards. Then I loaded my stuff in the trunk, we embraced, and I told him that I loved him. So he was gone. And I realized that I sang for him in the beginning, and I sang for him in the end. And I got to tell him that I loved him, and I got to tell him how he helped me become myself, and I don't know what more you can ask. He was a father figure, he was a great friend, he was above all my teacher. There is no higher calling, and he will always be my teacher. He lives in my head and in my heart, and as long as I have breath and lucid thought, that conversation will never end. It is ironic, perhaps, that we are having this celebration of life ceremony during a Kansas basketball game. I could never get him to really appreciate my love for sports as much as I compared it. I would compare it to the Aegon of the ancient Greeks. I did my best. I was in a heavy Camille Paglia phase for a few of those semesters, and I would discuss at length how sport was really about the masculine manipulation of the natural world, a feminine principle represented by the sphere, orbs and sticks, and that seemed to work. He got that. And there was one other thing that I never could get him to talk about. And this one thing is what I hope he was wrong about. Any kind of religion or spirituality. When I brought up God or an afterlife, Ted would sort of dissemble. Some of you might have seen this. he would start talking about the Greek roots of the word theology, and start kind of making the shape of the theta with his hands. And I always suspected that discussing religion with students wasn't something he particularly wanted to do for prosaic reasons. But I also, and maybe Mary and the family could speak a little bit better to this, suspect he was fundamentally agnostic. Now, in fairness, during the writing of this speech, it did occur to me that I could have called up and asked. But that would have messed up my big finish, so I decided not to do that. The fact is, I doubt very much that he believed in the permanence of the human soul. And that is one thing that I absolutely do believe, and that I fervently know that Ted was wrong about. I think he's here today. He's outside of our time and space, of course, but he's here with us now, nevertheless, celebrating the equinox, marveling at the music of the spheres, and whispering for us to seize the day. Thank you.
So perfectly captured by you folks today. Round of applause for everyone. This is just let us give that some love. I want to give credit where credit is due. We have a song to sing about Ted. And the inspiration for that song comes from my sweetie Deb Staven over here, who suggested the very well-known line that I will not give away immediately, but you'll recognize it. And all I can say is, wasn't he the wizard? Oh yeah. So I'm going to get on the other microphone to do this because I got my words over here. So just a second. Give me a chord. When your kettle's overflowing with all the stuff you're knowing, you'd never have to feign. Then everything I publish wouldn't just turn out as rubbish if I only had Ted's brain. I'd be like a grand thesaurus, seeing both the trees and forest, and ride that thoughtful train. For the joy of knowing stuff, and that a Madeline's not a muffin if I only had Ted's brain. Oh, I could tell you why this building tracks the skies and the Analemma's equinox sunrise, and then I'd pause, and then I'd surmise I would not be simulacra without a certain je ne sais quoi, but I'm sure I could explain. While the boffins up at Mensaul seem curiously prehensile if I only had Ted's brain, and heart, and eye, and sense of decorum. Thank you.
Thank you. There I am. Okay, just in closing again, many thanks to all of you who have been part of Ted's life and my life in one way or another. And please eat the food, drink the drinks, sign the register, come back. When is it, Steve? You're doing the artist tour? Sunday night at what time? 6:30 to 8 back here Sunday night while the show is still up, and then it goes away. Steve will be doing an artist tour, and if you'd like to come tomorrow between 1 and 5, the gallery's open as well. I haven't even had a chance to see the show and everything else, but anyway, Thank you to all who spoke.